The emergency beacon screamed across the void, its shrill digital cry piercing through the quantum foam that separated civilized space from the outer rim. On the bridge of the Galactic Council's flagship Serenity's Edge, Admiral Vexhai received the transmission with trembling appendages. The four-armed Quillen had seen many distress calls in his 3 centuries of service, but none had carried such raw terror. "Play it again," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. The communications officer, a young Terran with nervous eyes, hesitated. "Sir, are you certain? The audio is disturbing." "Play it." The bridge fell silent as the message began. Static filled the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of weapons fire and screaming. Then, through the chaos, came a voice speaking in perfect galactic standard, though the accent was unmistakably from the prison world of Kepler 442b. "This is Warden Moltek of Detention Facility Omega-7. We are under siege. The human prisoners have somehow broken free from their containment cells. They've taken control of the armory. We've lost contact with 3 entire sections. They're not just escaping, they're hunting us. We need immediate military assistance. The humans, by the void, what have we done? They're coming through the walls like demons. Send help. Please. Anyone." There, the transmission cut to static. Admiral Vexhai stared at the communication console, his 4 hands clenched into fists. Kepler 442b was supposed to be the most secure prison in the galaxy, a hellish world of perpetual storms and crushing gravity where the Council sent its most dangerous criminals. The fact that anyone could break out was impossible. The fact that humans had done it was terrifying. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "there's more. We're receiving similar distress calls from detention facilities Omega-3, Omega-12, and Omega-15. All of them reporting human breakouts. All of them requesting immediate assistance." The Admiral's blood ran cold. For separate prison worlds, all reporting the same impossible situation. He had helped design the security protocols for those facilities himself. Each one housed thousands of human prisoners, beings captured during the brief but brutal human galactic war that had ended just 5 years ago. They were supposed to be broken, defeated, serving their sentences for the crime of resisting Galactic Council authority. "How many humans are we talking about, total?" Vexhai asked. The young officer's face went pale. "Across all 4 facilities, sir? Approximately 50,000. 50,000. Vexhai felt his stomach drop. During the war, a single human battalion had held off an entire Council fleet for 3 standard months before finally being overwhelmed. These weren't just any humans. These were the survivors of humanity's most elite military units, the ones who had fought hardest and longest against impossible odds. They had been captured, not surrendered. "Give me a direct line to High Command," Vexhai ordered. "Priority Alpha clearance." Within moments, the holographic image of Grand Admiral Zeftul materialized on the bridge. The ancient Vorthan looked even older than usual, his crystalline features dim with worry. "Admiral Vexhai." Zeftul's voice carried the weight of authority across light years. "I assume you've received the reports from the Omega facilities." "Yes, sir." "How is this possible?" "Those prisons were designed to hold beings from the heaviest gravity worlds in the galaxy. The security systems are impenetrable." Zeftul's image flickered with what might have been regret. "We underestimated them, Admiral. We thought imprisonment would break their spirit. Instead, we gave them time to plan, to organize, and to remember exactly why their species terrified us so much during the war." The implications hit Vexhai like a physical blow. "Sir, if they've truly broken free, and if they can somehow leave those worlds, then we face the prospect of 50,000 trained human warriors, angry beyond measure, loose in the galaxy." Zeftul paused, his crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy. "Admiral, I'm authorizing the formation of Task Force Omega. You will take every available ship in the 7th Fleet and proceed immediately to Kepler 442b. Your orders are to contain the situation at all costs. And if containment is not possible..." The silence stretched for long seconds before Zeftul responded. "Then, we pray to whatever gods still listen that mercy is a concept humans remember." The connection ended, leaving Vexhai alone with his thoughts and the growing dread in his chest. He had fought humans before, during the final year of the war. He had seen what they could do when cornered, when fighting for their survival. But those had been humans fighting for their homeworld, for their families. These would be humans with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. Navigation, he called out. Set course for Kepler, 442b, maximum speed. Communications, send word to all ships in the 7th Fleet. Emergency rendezvous at coordinates 77 Mark 12. As the Serenity's edge turned toward its destination, its powerful engines carving a path through space-time, Vexhai couldn't shake the feeling that he was leading his fleet towards something far worse than a prison break. The humans had been quiet for 5 years, serving their sentences without major incident. But perhaps that quiet hadn't been resignation. Perhaps it had been planning. 12 hours later, the 7th Fleet assembled in the void between stars, 37 ships of various classes arranged in perfect formation. Vexhai studied the tactical display on his bridge, noting with satisfaction the presence of 3 dreadnoughts, 8 heavy cruisers, and a full complement of support vessels. It was enough firepower to glass a small moon. It would have to be enough. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we're receiving updated intelligence from Kepler, 442b. The situation has deteriorated. Vexhai didn't want to ask, but command required it. How badly? The humans have taken control of the entire primary facility. They've also captured the orbital defense platforms and are using them to prevent any ships from approaching the planet. 3 Council transport vessels that attempted to evacuate non-human personnel were destroyed without warning. The bridge fell silent. The orbital defense platforms around Kepler, 442b, were military-grade weapons designed to repel invasion fleets. If the humans controlled them, a direct assault would be costly even for a fleet this size. Any word from the other Omega facilities? Similar reports, sir. The humans appear to be coordinating their actions across multiple worlds. They've established some form of communication network between the facilities. Vexhai nodded grimly. Of course they had. Humans were notorious for their ability to improvise communication systems from the most basic materials. During the war, Council forces had repeatedly discovered human-resistant cells operating sophisticated networks using nothing more than salvaged electronics and determination. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from Kepler, 442b. It's addressed to you personally. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of what had once been Warden Moltek's office. Now, a human sat behind the desk, wearing a prison uniform that had been modified with what appeared to be rank insignia torn from guard uniforms. The man was perhaps 40 standard years old, with graying hair and scars that spoke of a lifetime of combat. His eyes held a cold intelligence that made Vexhai's skin crawl. Admiral Vexhai, the human said, his voice carrying the same terrifying calm that had characterized human military communications during the war. I am Colonel Marcus Chun, formerly of the Terran Colonial Marines, currently the elected commander of Detention Facility Omega-7. I understand you're having some concerns about our recent change in management. Vexhai found his voice. Colonel Chun, you are in violation of approximately 400 galactic statutes. I'm prepared to discuss terms for your surrender. Chin's smile was like watching a predator bare its teeth. Admiral, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not surrendering. We're offering you the opportunity to surrender to us. The audacity of it left Vexhai speechless for a moment. Colonel, you're imprisoned on a planet with crushing gravity and constant storms, surrounded by a fleet of 37 warships. What exactly do you think your position of strength is? Well, for starters, we're not just on Kepler, 442b anymore. Chin gestured, and the camera panned to show the office windows. Through the reinforced glass, Vexhai could see the planet's surface and the massive construction projects taking place there. Humans in environmental suits were assembling what looked like ship components on a scale that defied belief. You see, Admiral, you made a crucial mistake 5 years ago. You assumed that prison would break us. Instead, you gave 50,000 of humanity's best engineers, soldiers, and tacticians nothing to do but think about how much we hate you. Do you have any idea what 50,000 humans can build when they're properly motivated? Vexhai stared at the screen, his worst fears crystallizing into horrible reality. That's impossible. You don't have the resources, the materials. Oh, but we do. Chin's smile grew wider. Kepler, 442b might be a hell world to most species, but it's remarkably rich in heavy metals and rare elements. And humans, as you might recall, are remarkably good at extracting resources from hostile environments. We've been mining, smelting, and building for 5 years. 20 hours a day, every day, building and waiting for the right moment. The tactical officer whispered urgently in Vexhai's ear, "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Something big is powering up down there." Chun continued as if he had heard. "You're probably wondering why we waited until now to make our move. The answer is simple. We weren't ready. But 3 days ago, we received some very interesting intelligence about Galactic Council fleet movements. It seems you've been preparing for something big. A final push, perhaps, to break the last human resistance cells." Vexhai's blood turned to ice. The intelligence was classified at the highest levels. If the humans had somehow learned about Operation Final Solution. "So we decided to move up our timeline," Chin said. "Consider this our official declaration of war. Again, except this time, we're not fighting to defend our homes. We're fighting to take yours." Behind Chin, alarms began blaring. Through the windows, Vexhai could see massive shapes rising from concealed positions on the planet's surface. Ships, dozens of them, hundreds, each one bigger than anything humanity had fielded during the original war. "You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet to a distance of no less than 50 astronomical units," Chin said, his voice now carrying the cold authority of a man who had already won. "After that, we will consider any council vessel within this system to be a legitimate military target. And Admiral, when we come for you, we won't be taking prisoners. Not this time." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Serenity's edge in stunned silence. On the tactical display, energy readings from Kepler 442b continued to climb. Whatever the humans had built during their 5 years of captivity, it was big enough to power a small star. Vexhai stared at the readings, trying to process the impossibility of what he was seeing. 50,000 humans, working in secret for 5 years, had somehow constructed a fleet from nothing. It shouldn't have been possible. The laws of physics, of logistics, of basic engineering should have prevented it. But humans, as he was once again learning, had a disturbing tendency to make the impossible seem routine. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving similar transmissions from the other Omega facilities. The humans aren't just breaking out. They're coordinating a simultaneous offensive across 4-star systems." Vexhai closed his eyes and tried to think. For simultaneous breakouts, coordinated across light years of space, each one revealing massive construction projects that had somehow remained hidden from orbital surveillance for 5 years. The scope of the planning involved was staggering. Worse, the intelligence breach that had revealed Operation Final Solution suggested the humans had been receiving outside information, which meant they hadn't been fighting alone. "Give me high command," he ordered. "Emergency priority. And prepare the fleet for immediate withdrawal to the specified distance. Until we know what we're facing, discretion is the better part of valor." As the 7th Fleet began its tactical retreat, Vexhai couldn't help but remember something a human prisoner had told him during the war. The man had been dying, his ship destroyed, his crew dead. But he had looked Vexhai in the eye and smiled. "You think you've won," the human had whispered with his last breath. "But you haven't met us yet. Not really. Wait until you see what we can do when we're angry." Now, watching impossible ships rise from the surface of what should have been an impregnable prison world, Vexhai finally understood what that dying human had meant. The war hadn't ended 5 years ago. It had just been postponed. Admiral Vexhai watched his tactical display with growing horror as the true scope of human preparation revealed itself. From the storm-racked surface of Kepler 442b, ship after ship emerged from concealed launch bays that should never have existed. Each vessel was a testament to 5 years of focused rage and engineering brilliance, built from salvaged materials and powered by pure determination. "Count?" he asked his tactical officer, though he dreaded the answer. 217 confirmed launches, sir. Still climbing. The designs. "Admiral, I've never seen anything like these ships. They don't match any known human configuration from the war. Vexhai studied the display more closely. The human vessels were indeed unlike anything in Council databases. Where human warships during the conflict had been sleek and angular, these new ships appeared organic, flowing. Their hulls curved like living things, and their weapon configurations defied conventional wisdom about power distribution and targeting efficiency. "They've had 5 years to evolve," he muttered. 5 years to think about everything we did wrong, everything they did wrong, and how to do it better. On the communications channel, status reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The other Omega facilities were experiencing identical breakouts, each one revealing fleets that shouldn't exist. Collectively, the humans were fielding over 1,000 ships from the 4 prison worlds, all apparently built in secret using resources that weren't supposed to be available to prisoners. The bridge's atmosphere grew tense as sensor data continued streaming in. The human ships weren't just numerous, they were big. The smallest vessels appeared to be the size of Council heavy cruisers, while the largest defied classification entirely. One ship emerging from Kepler 442b registered as nearly 2 kilometers long, its mass readings suggesting armor thickness that bordered on the ridiculous. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "priority transmission from High Command. Grand Admiral Zeftul wants to speak with you immediately." The holographic projection materialized, showing not just Zeftul, but the entire Galactic Council leadership. Representatives from dozens of species crowded around the communication array, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright panic. Vexhai recognized the signs of a civilization suddenly, realizing it had made a catastrophic miscalculation. "Admiral Vexhai," Zeftul began, his crystalline features dim with stress, "report your status immediately." "Sir, the human breakout is confirmed across all 4 Omega facilities. They've revealed significant naval assets, over 1,000 ships total, all of unknown design and capability. I've ordered my fleet to withdraw to safe distance as requested by the human commander." The reaction was immediate. Several council members began speaking at once, their voices rising in a cacophony of disbelief and fear. A Carillion representative, his tentacles writhing in distress, demanded to know how prisoners could possibly construct a fleet. A Valdris delegate insisted the entire situation was impossible and demanded Vexhai confirm his sensor readings. Silence. Zeftul's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, you said the human commander made contact. What were his demands?" Vexhai hesitated. The truth would send the council into full panic, but lies would only make the situation worse. "Sir, Colonel Marcus Chun, the human commander, has declared war on the Galactic Council. He's given us 1 hour to withdraw to 50 astronomical units or be considered legitimate military targets." The silence that followed was deafening. Even through the holographic projection, Vexhai could feel the weight of an entire galactic civilization suddenly, realizing it might be facing extinction. Furthermore, Vexhai continued, knowing he had to share everything. "The humans demonstrated knowledge of Operation Final Solution. They know about our planned offensive against the remaining human resistance cells. Sir, we have a massive intelligence breach." This time, the panic was visible. Council members began speaking rapidly to their aides, no doubt ordering security reviews and communication lockdowns. The possibility of human intelligence networks operating within Council space had been considered impossible. Now, faced with evidence of 5-year construction projects hidden from orbital surveillance, nothing seemed impossible anymore. "Admiral," Zeftul said slowly, "your assessment of human capabilities based on current intelligence." Vexhai studied his tactical display once more. The human ships had formed into organized formations, moving with precision that spoke of extensive training and preparation. Their positioning suggested familiarity with Council fleet tactics and a clear understanding of how to counter them. "Sir, if these ships are as capable as their size suggests, and if the humans have maintained their technological advancement rate from the war period, we're facing a force that could potentially challenge the entire Council Navy. 50,000 humans, working for 5 years with focused purpose, could theoretically produce." He paused, running calculations in his head. A technological advantage we're not prepared to counter. The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. During the original human galactic war, human technological development had proceeded at a rate that defied belief. Where other species refined their technology over centuries, humans seemed to develop new weapons and tactics monthly. The war had lasted 3 years specifically because every time the Council adapted to human capabilities, the humans had already moved on to something new. Grand Admiral, a new voice interrupted. Admiral Korgeth of the Second Fleet was requesting emergency channel access. We're receiving reports from deep space monitoring stations. The humans aren't just launching from the prison worlds. We're detecting massive energy signatures from multiple locations across human space. It appears they've been building there too. Zeftul's crystalline features went completely dark. Elaborate. Sir, we're tracking at least 12 major construction sites within the former human colonial region. Energy signatures suggest they've been active for possibly years. The scale of construction appears to be substantial. Vexhai felt his stomach drop again. The prison worlds had been holding 50,000 humans. The former colonial regions had once housed nearly 1 billion humans before the forced relocations. If even a fraction of them had been building in secret, how many humans are we potentially facing? Zeftul asked the question everyone was thinking. Unknown, sir. Our intelligence estimates suggested the human population had been reduced to approximately 200 million across all relocated settlements. However, if they've been coordinating construction efforts and maintaining communication networks without our knowledge, the implication was clear. The Council had assumed the relocated human populations were struggling with basic survival on marginal worlds. Instead, they might have been building the largest military force in galactic history. Admiral Vexhai, Zeftul said, his voice carrying the weight of command decision. You are to maintain your current position and observe. Do not engage unless directly attacked. We need intelligence on human capabilities before we can formulate a response. Sir, with respect, Colonel Chin's ultimatum expires in 37 minutes. If we don't withdraw as requested, then we'll discover what these new human ships can do in combat. We need that information, Admiral. The entire Council needs that information. Vexhai understood. He was being ordered to sacrifice his fleet as a probe to determine human capabilities through direct combat. It was a sound strategic decision that would provide crucial intelligence for future operations. It was also likely to result in the deaths of everyone under his command. Understood, sir. 7th Fleet will maintain position and gather combat intelligence. The communication ended, leaving Vexhai alone with his thoughts and his duty. Around him, the bridge crew continued their work with the professionalism of trained military personnel, but he could see the tension in their movements. They all understood what was coming. 20 minutes remained when the first human ship broke formation and began moving toward the Council fleet. It was one of the smaller vessels, perhaps 800 meters long, moving with fluid grace through the void. Its approach vector suggested confidence rather than caution, and its energy signature showed weapon systems already charging. All ships maintained defensive positions, Vexhai ordered across the fleet communication network. Weapons hot, shields at maximum, but do not fire unless fired upon. We're here to gather intelligence. The human ship closed to what should have been optimal weapons range for Council vessels, then kept coming. It passed through the engagement zone without firing, continuing until it reached a distance of barely 50 kilometers from the Serenity's edge. At that range, both ships' shields were almost touching. Admiral, his communications officer announced, the human vessel is requesting communication. Put them through. The main screen displayed the interior of what appeared to be a human bridge, though the design was unlike anything from the war. Instead of the sterile, military efficiency of human warships, this bridge seemed almost organic, with flowing lines and surfaces that pulsed with soft light. At the center sat a woman perhaps 50 standard years old, her graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her expression calm but uncompromising. Admiral Vexhai, she said, her voice carrying the same terrifying composure that had characterized Colonel Chin's transmission. I am Captain Sarah Rodriguez, commanding the human vessel Retribution. You have 7 minutes to begin your withdrawal. Captain Rodriguez, Vexhai replied, trying to project calm authority. I am under orders to maintain position and observe. We have no hostile intent. Rodriguez's smile was worse than Chen's had been. Where the colonel had shown predatory satisfaction, the captain displayed the kind of gentle disappointment usually reserved for explaining complex concepts to children. Admiral, you seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It isn't. You have 6 minutes and 30 seconds to begin withdrawing to the specified distance. After that, we will remove you. The casual certainty in her voice sent chills through Vexhi's consciousness. Captain, you're facing a fleet of 37 ships with a single vessel. What exactly do you think you can accomplish? Admiral, let me ask you a question. During the war, what was the human ship-to-ship kill ratio against Council forces? Vexhi didn't want to answer, but the data was well known. Approximately 7-to-1 in favor of human forces. And that was with ships hastily converted from civilian designs, using improvised weapons and tactics developed during the conflict itself. The retribution was designed specifically to kill Council ships. We've had 5 years to study your tactics, your weaknesses, your every strategic and technological limitation. We know exactly how your shields work, how your weapons cycle, how your engines generate power, and how your computers process targeting data. As she spoke, Rodriguez's fingers moved across what appeared to be control surfaces built into her chair's armrests. On Vexhi's tactical display, new contacts began appearing. Hundreds of them. The human ships weren't visible to the naked eye, but they were definitely there, scattered throughout the system in positions that would allow them to catch any fleeing Council vessel. You see, Admiral, we've been watching you for 5 years. Every patrol route, every communication protocol, every weakness in your formations. We know your ships better than you do, and we've designed ours specifically to exploit every vulnerability we've identified. The tactical picture was becoming clearer and more terrifying. The humans hadn't just built ships, they had engineered a systematic counter to every aspect of Council naval doctrine. Their positioning suggested they had studied Council fleet movements so thoroughly that they could predict response patterns with mathematical precision. For minutes, Admiral Vexhi made his decision. Pride and duty were important, but suicide was not a military virtue. All ships begin withdrawal to 50 astronomical units. Maximum speed. As the 7th Fleet turned to retreat, Rodriguez's voice followed them across the void. Admiral, one more thing. Tell your superiors that this is their only warning. The human race is officially resuming hostilities with the Galactic Council. But this time, we're not fighting for survival. We're fighting for victory. And we're very, very good at winning. The transmission ended as the retribution turned away, rejoining the human fleet with casual efficiency. Vexhi watched the tactical display as his ships accelerated toward the edge of the system, their sensors continuing to track human movements. The data they were collecting would change everything. The humans weren't just breaking out of prison, they were launching a war they had been planning and preparing for since the day they surrendered. Worse, they were launching it from a position of strength that the Council had never imagined possible. As the Serenity's edge reached the specified distance and began its journey toward Council space, Vexhi could only hope that High Command would understand the intelligence they were about to receive. The humans were coming. They were organized, prepared, and angry beyond measure. And this time, they intended to win. High Admiral Zeftal stood in the center of the Galactic Council's primary war room, studying the massive holographic display that showed human fleet movements across 12 star systems. The intelligence gathered by Admiral Vexhi's retreat had been processed and analyzed by the Council's best strategic computers, and the results painted a picture that challenged everything the galaxy's leadership thought they knew about warfare. Analysis complete, announced the Carillion intelligence chief, his tentacles weaving complex patterns of distress. Human fleet strength is estimated at minimum 4,000 vessels, with individual ship displacement averaging 3 times larger than comparable Council designs. Construction rate analysis suggests they have been building continuously for approximately 6 standard years. 6 years. That meant human construction had begun even before their official surrender, while they were still fighting the Council's forces in their home systems. The implications were staggering. The humans had been planning this war while they were losing the previous one. Technological assessment. Zeftal asked, though he dreaded the answer. Unknown, but presumed advanced. Energy signatures suggest power plants operating at efficiency levels we cannot match. Weapon configurations appear optimized for anti-council engagement profiles. Shield harmonics are unprecedented. The room fell silent as the assembled leadership absorbed this information. Representatives from 47 species sat around the circular chamber, each trying to process the reality that their supposedly defeated enemy had spent years building a military force that dwarfed anything in recorded galactic history. Strategic assessment. Zeftel continued. The Valdris tactical coordinator, his mechanical voice devoid of emotion, delivered the evaluation that would reshape galactic policy. Based on observed capabilities and deployment patterns, human forces appear positioned for simultaneous strikes against major council installations across 18 sectors. Primary targets likely include naval bases, industrial centers, and communication hubs. Secondary objectives appear to include civilian population centers. A Thraxian delegate leaped to his feet, his insectoid features twitching with agitation. Impossible. No force could coordinate attacks across such distances. The logistics alone, the humans did it during the original war, interrupted Admiral Korgeth, his voice carrying the weight of bitter experience. Operation Thunderstrike. They hit 47 council positions simultaneously across 8 sectors using improvised forces and captured equipment. That was 3 years ago, with minimal preparation time. Now they've had 5 years to plan. The reminder sent a chill through the assembled leadership. Operation Thunderstrike had been humanity's most devastating single action during the war, a coordinated assault that had temporarily paralyzed council operations across multiple sectors. It had taken months to recover from the damage, and only massive numerical superiority had allowed the council to ultimately overcome human resistance. Now the humans had numbers to match their tactical brilliance. Estimated council casualties if hostilities resume. Zeftel asked. The silence stretched uncomfortably before the tactical coordinator responded. Based on historical performance ratios and observed technological advancement, catastrophic. The human forces appear specifically designed to counter our defensive strategies. If they maintain their historical kill ratio advantages with their new technological base. The coordinator paused, consulting his data systems before continuing with mechanical precision. Projected council fleet survival rate in direct engagement, 12%. Projected civilian casualties in targeted population centers, 40 to 60%. Projected timeline for complete council military defeat, 18 to 36 standard months. The numbers hit the chamber like physical blows. Several delegates began speaking at once, their voices rising in panic and denial. The carefully maintained order of galactic civilization was crumbling as the reality of human preparation became clear. Silence. Zeftel's voice cut through the chaos. We need solutions, not panic. What are our options? The Quillan defense minister, his forearms gesticulating frantically, was the first to speak. Immediate mobilization of all reserve fleets. If we can concentrate our forces. No. Admiral Korgeth's interruption was firm. Human intelligence networks have demonstrated capacity for real-time strategic information. Any fleet concentration will be detected and countered before it can be effective. During the war, they consistently anticipated our movements by margins that suggested either prescience or perfect intelligence gathering. The intelligence chief confirmed this assessment with a disturbing detail. Analysis of human communications during Admiral Vexhai's encounter suggests they possessed detailed knowledge of council fleet positions, command structures, and operational protocols. Their intelligence capability appears to have improved significantly since the war's end. Zeftel felt the weight of command settle on his crystalline shoulders. The council faced an enemy that knew their capabilities, had studied their weaknesses, and had spent years building the perfect weapons to exploit every vulnerability. Worse, that enemy was no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for conquest. What about diplomatic solutions? Asked the Terran liaison, a young woman whose species had remained neutral during the human conflict. Perhaps we could negotiate. With what leverage? The Thraxian delegate's voice carried bitter laughter. We imprisoned 50,000 of their people for 5 years while believing we had broken their spirit. We planned Operation Final Solution to eliminate the remainder of their species. And Now we discover they've been watching us, planning against us, building weapons to destroy us. What exactly would we offer in negotiations that they couldn't simply take by force? The question hung in the air unanswered because everyone knew the truth. The Council had nothing to offer that could match what the humans could achieve through military victory. They had shown during the original war that they were capable of taking anything they wanted from captured Council territories. Now they had the ships to take everything. A priority communication alert interrupted the discussion. The chamber's central display shifted to show Admiral Vexhi's face, his expression grim with fresh intelligence. "High Command," Vexhi reported. "We're receiving communications from across the galaxy. The humans aren't waiting for their ultimatum to expire. They've begun offensive operations against Council installations in the Outer Rim. 7 naval bases have gone dark in the last 4 hours. Long-range sensors are tracking human fleets moving toward core worlds." The news sent another wave of panic through the chamber. Core worlds were the heart of galactic civilization, home to trillions of beings, and the primary industrial centers that supported the entire Council infrastructure. If humans could reach and threaten those systems. Details on the Outer Rim attacks. Zeftel asked. Preliminary reports suggest complete destruction of all 7 bases. No survivors, no escaped vessels. Attack duration appears to have been less than 30 minutes per target. Human forces demonstrated overwhelming tactical superiority. 30 minutes to destroy a naval base. During the original war, similar attacks had required hours and resulted in significant human casualties. The improvement in efficiency suggested technological advancement that made even the most pessimistic projections seem optimistic. "Sir," Vexhi continued, "there's more. The humans have issued a general communication to all Council worlds. They're demanding the immediate surrender of all government officials and military commanders. They've given us 72 hours to comply, or they begin targeting civilian population centers." The ultimatum was worse than anyone had imagined. The humans weren't seeking military victory. They were demanding unconditional surrender from the entire Galactic Council. It was the kind of demand that could only be made by a force confident of absolute victory. "What are they offering in return for surrender?" asked the Carillion intelligence chief. Vexhi's expression grew even grimmer. "Survival. They've made it clear that resistance will result in what they term species reduction to manageable levels. They're not interested in conquest. They're planning genocide on a galactic scale." The word hung in the chamber air like a death sentence. Genocide. The systematic elimination of entire species. It was a concept so alien to modern galactic thought that several delegates seemed unable to process it. The Council had certainly committed violence, had forced relocations, and demanded submission, but the idea of deliberately destroying entire civilizations was beyond their experience. But not beyond human experience. During the war, facing complete defeat and the potential elimination of their species, humans had demonstrated a capacity for violence that had shocked even hardened Council military leaders. They had fought with a desperation and fury that had made them willing to sacrifice anything for victory. Now, with the roles reversed, they appeared ready to apply that same absolute commitment to destroying their enemies. Options. Zeftel asked the assembled leadership, though he suspected the answer. Immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from potential target zones, suggested the Valdris coordinator. Concentrate remaining population centers in heavily defended core systems. Useless, Admiral Korgeth responded. Human intelligence networks will track any evacuation efforts, and their demonstrated capability suggests no defensive position would be effective against determined assault. "What about the other species?" asked the Quillen defense minister. "The non-aligned civilizations, the neutral territories? Surely they would assist us against this threat." The intelligence chief's response was immediate and damning. Initial analysis suggests human diplomatic efforts have been ongoing for several years. At least 12 non-aligned species have declared neutrality and forbidden Council military access to their territory. 6 others have requested human protection against potential Council retaliation. The humans appear to have been building a diplomatic coalition while building their fleet. The scope of human preparation was becoming clear. They hadn't just spent 5 years building ships and planning attacks. They had been conducting a comprehensive strategic campaign to isolate the Council diplomatically while positioning themselves as liberators rather than conquerors. It was a level of long-term planning that demonstrated not just tactical brilliance, but strategic genius on a galactic scale. 72 hours, Zeftul said quietly. What can we accomplish in 72 hours? The answer, though unspoken, was clear to everyone in the chamber. Nothing. The Council could mobilize reserve fleets, could attempt to concentrate forces for defense, could try to negotiate with neutral species for assistance. But none of it would matter against an enemy that had spent 6 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Sir, Admiral Korgeth said quietly, there is one option we haven't discussed. Speak. Preemptive surrender. Accept human terms before they begin targeting civilian populations. Save what lives we can. The suggestion sparked immediate outrage from several delegates, but Zeftul raised a hand for silence. The harsh reality was that Korgeth might be right. Pride and principle were luxuries they could no longer afford. The choice was becoming clear: surrender now and hope for mercy, or resist and watch entire civilizations burn. I need 12 hours to consider all options, Zeftul announced. This session is suspended. All department heads report to my office immediately for emergency planning. As the chamber emptied, Zeftul remained behind, staring at the tactical display that showed human fleets moving inexorably toward the heart of galactic civilization. Somewhere in those ships were 50,000 beings who had spent 5 years planning this moment, studying Council weaknesses, and building the tools necessary for absolute victory. The war that the Council thought it had won was about to begin again. And this time, humanity intended to finish it permanently. Captain Sarah Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the holographic tactical display that showed the final phase of humanity's carefully orchestrated return to war. 48 hours had passed since their ultimatum to the Galactic Council, and the response had been exactly what human strategists had predicted: panic, confusion, and, ultimately, defiance. The Council had chosen resistance over surrender. Fleet status report, she commanded, her voice carrying across the bridge of the ship that had been built specifically for this moment. All human fleets report ready for Operation Reckoning, her tactical officer responded. 4,217 ships distributed across 19 target zones. Support fleets from allied species standing by in reserve positions. Long-range reconnaissance confirms Council fleet positions match projected deployment patterns. Sarah nodded, unsurprised by the accuracy of their intelligence. Human agents had been embedded within Council society for 6 years, not as spies, but as invisible servants, maintenance workers, and other personnel that powerful civilizations never bothered to notice. The same species that had overlooked 50,000 humans building a war fleet on prison worlds had failed to realize that their mundane staff positions were populated by some of the most highly trained intelligence operatives in galactic history. Communication from Admiral Chun aboard the Vengeance, announced the communications officer. Operation Prometheus is ready to commence. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Operation Prometheus. The systematic destruction of every major Council military installation in a coordinated strike that would last exactly 6 hours and eliminate the Council's capacity for organized resistance. It was named after the Titan who had stolen fire from the gods, and, like its namesake, it would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Signal all fleet commanders. Prometheus is authorized. Begin primary phase. Across 19 star systems, human fleets moved from concealment toward their targets. The ships that emerged from hiding represented 6 years of focused engineering, each one designed according to principles learned from studying captured Council technology and analyzing the weaknesses that had been exposed during the original war. Where Council ships prioritized balanced capability across multiple mission profiles, human vessels were optimized for single purposes. Ship killers carried weapons that could punch through any known armor. Troop transports were built to survive anything short of direct stellar impact. Command ships processed information and coordinated operations with computational power that matched planetary networks. Most importantly, every single human vessel had been built by people who understood exactly what they were for. There were no compromises, no political considerations, no bureaucratic inefficiencies. Each ship existed for one purpose: to destroy the Galactic Council so thoroughly that it could never again threaten human survival. Initiating jump to Target Zone 7, Sarah announced to her bridge crew. Estimated arrival time, for minutes. All departments report readiness. The Retribution engaged its faster-than-light drive, sliding through dimensions that Council scientists had mapped but never truly understood. Human engineers, working with data stolen during the war and refined through years of experimentation, had developed jump drives that were faster, more accurate, and more efficient than anything in Council service. When the Retribution emerged from hyperspace, it was exactly where Sarah had intended to be. 50,000 kilometers from Starbase Meridian, the Council's primary military coordination center for the entire eastern sector. The base was massive, a constructed world that housed 3 million personnel and coordinated the movements of over 800 Council warships. It was also completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Target acquisition complete, her weapons officer reported. All primary systems identified and locked. Council defensive platforms are powering up, but their reaction time is approximately 40 seconds behind optimal response curves. 40 seconds was an eternity in modern space combat. During the original war, human forces had consistently demonstrated reaction times that seemed impossible to Council tacticians. Now, with 6 years of preparation and ships designed for maximum efficiency, that advantage had only grown. Fire. The Retribution carried weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Where Council energy weapons relied on focused particle beams that required time to burn through armor, human vessels mounted kinetic accelerators that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The impact energy was devastating, but, more importantly, the projectiles were impossible to intercept and required no warm-up time. Starbase Meridian's shields held for approximately 3 seconds before the first projectiles punched through. The base's armor, designed to withstand conventional energy weapons, offered no meaningful resistance to metal moving at relativistic speeds. In 17 seconds, every major system on the station was destroyed. In 31 seconds, the base itself ceased to exist as a coherent structure. 3 million Council personnel died before they could send a distress signal. Target eliminated, the weapons officer reported with professional calm. No survivors detected. Proceeding to secondary objectives. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as human fleets emerged from hiding and systematically destroyed everything that had made Council military resistance possible. Naval bases vanished in minutes. Orbital shipyards were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Command centers that had coordinated galactic policy for centuries simply ceased to exist. The speed and efficiency were possible because humans had studied their targets for 6 years. Every weakness, every critical system, every defensive vulnerability had been cataloged and analyzed. The attacks weren't random violence. They were surgical elimination of specific capabilities that would prevent the Council from mounting any meaningful resistance to what came next. Communication from Fleet Command, the communications officer announced. Phase 1 complete across all target zones. Council military infrastructure has been eliminated. Phase 2 is authorized to commence. Phase 2. Sarah felt a cold satisfaction as she authorized her ship's movement toward the next objective. Phase 2 involved something that would send a message across the galaxy about what happened to civilizations that imprisoned humans and planned genocide against their species. The target was Luxuria Prime, the Council's capital world and home to the leadership that had made the decision to imprison 50,000 humans while planning the complete elimination of their species. It was defended by the most powerful fleet in Council space, and protected by orbital platforms that could theoretically hold off an invasion force 10 times larger than anything the humans could deploy. But the humans weren't planning an invasion. Jump complete, reported the navigation officer as the Retribution emerged in the luxurious system. Target in range. Fleet composition as predicted. On the tactical display, Sarah could see the Council's home defense fleet. 200 of their most advanced ships arranged in defensive formations around the planet that housed 40 billion beings. It was an impressive sight, representing the culmination of centuries of military development and engineering excellence. It was also completely inadequate for what they were about to face. Signal from Admiral Chun. Communications announced. The Vengeance is in position. Operation Damocles is authorized. Operation Damocles. The demonstration that would end the war without requiring years of bloody conquest. Sarah watched as Admiral Chen's flagship, the massive Vengeance, moved into position above Luxuria Prime. The ship was nearly 3 kilometers long and had been built for a single purpose: to carry the weapon that would change galactic civilization forever. Council fleet is moving to intercept, Tactical reported. They're maintaining defensive formation, but advancing to weapons range. Estimated contact in 6 minutes. Signal all ships. Engage Defensive Protocol 7. We're not here to fight their fleet. We're here to show them why fighting is pointless. The human fleet formation shifted, individual ships moving to positions that would maximize their defensive capability while protecting the Vengeance during its approach to the planet. The formation was unlike anything in Council tactical doctrine because it had been developed specifically to counter Council weapons and tactics. When the Council fleet opened fire, their weapons struck human shields that had been designed to absorb and dissipate exactly that type of energy. When they launched missiles, they found themselves targeting ships that moved in patterns their guidance systems couldn't track. When they attempted to coordinate their attacks, they discovered that human electronic warfare systems were jamming their communications with a precision that suggested perfect knowledge of their frequencies and protocols. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, the Council fleet had lost 63 ships while the humans had suffered damage to 7 vessels and no losses. It was a demonstration of technological and tactical superiority that left no room for doubt about the ultimate outcome of any prolonged conflict. But the real message was what happened next. Vengeance reports weapon deployment ready. Communications announced. Target lock achieved on the Luxuria governmental complex. Sarah watched as the massive ship positioned itself directly above the planet's capital city. From its primary weapon bay, a single projectile launched, not toward the city, but toward a carefully calculated point approximately 50 kilometers above it. When the projectile reached its designated coordinates, it detonated. The explosion wasn't nuclear or antimatter or any conventional weapon. It was something that human scientists had developed during 6 years of focused research. A localized gravitational distortion that created a miniature black hole lasting exactly 0.003 seconds. The effect on the surrounding space was devastating but precisely controlled. Every electronic system in the capital city stopped functioning. Every computer, every communication device, every piece of technology more sophisticated than a mechanical gear simply ceased to operate. The effect was temporary. Systems would resume function within hours. But the message was unmistakable. The humans could shut down an entire planetary civilization with a single shot. And they had done it without killing a single being. Open channel to the planet, Sarah ordered. The communication array connected her to every functioning receiver on Luxuria Prime, allowing her voice to reach 40 billion beings simultaneously. This is Captain Sarah Rodriguez of the Human Liberation Fleet. You have just witnessed a demonstration of our technological capability. Your capital city is now without power, without communication, without any technology more advanced than clockwork. We have done this without harming a single being because we want you to understand something very important. She paused, allowing her words to reach across a planet that was suddenly and completely defenseless. 6 years ago, your government made the decision to imprison 50,000 humans while planning the complete elimination of our species. You believed you had broken us. You believed you had won. You were wrong. We have spent 6 years building the weapons and ships necessary to ensure that no species will ever again threaten human survival. Another pause, as the reality of their situation reached the minds of Council leadership. You now have a choice. You can surrender unconditionally and accept whatever mercy we choose to offer. Or you can continue to resist, and we will demonstrate that the gravitational weapon that just disabled your capital can be reconfigured to create permanent effects. The choice is yours, but you have exactly 1 hour to make it. The transmission ended, leaving Luxuria Prime in technological darkness, and the Council leadership with a decision that would determine the future of galactic civilization. surrender, and hope for mercy from an enemy they had tried to destroy or resist, and face weapons that could eliminate their entire species without requiring human ships to fire a single conventional shot. Looking at the tactical display showing human fleets positioned around 19 Council core worlds, Sarah knew what their choice would be. The humans had demonstrated not just overwhelming military superiority, but weapons that made resistance literally pointless. The war was over. Now came the question of what humanity would do with its victory. Admiral Marcus Chin stood in the newly constructed command center aboard the Vengeance, watching holographic displays that showed the complete surrender of the Galactic Council across 47 systems. The process had taken 6 days from the demonstration at Luxuria Prime, as word spread through Council space that resistance was not merely futile but actively suicidal. The humans had won, not just a battle or a campaign, but the war itself. The question now was what to do with victory. Final report from all fleet commanders, his aide announced. Council military infrastructure has been completely eliminated across all target zones. Their naval capacity is reduced to system defense ships and civilian vessels. No meaningful resistance remains. Chin nodded, studying the strategic display that showed human fleets positioned throughout what had once been Council space. In 6 days, 50,000 humans and their carefully crafted ships had accomplished what entire civilizations had failed to achieve in centuries: the complete subjugation of the galaxy's dominant political entity. But Chin had not spent 6 years planning this war for conquest. He had planned it for something far more important. Signal all fleet commanders, he ordered. Phase 3 is authorized. Begin implementation of Protocol Restoration. Protocol Restoration. The plan that represented the true purpose of everything they had built, everything they had sacrificed, and everyone they had lost. It wasn't about destroying the Council. It was about replacing it with something better. The first step involved something that would shock the galaxy. Mercy. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender requests from over 300 individual Council worlds. They're requesting terms for capitulation. Standard response, Chin replied. Unconditional surrender accepted. All Council military personnel to report to designated collection points for processing. All governmental officials to remain in place pending new administrative arrangements. No reprisals against civilian populations. No military occupation of civilian areas. Local law enforcement to maintain order pending transition. The aide looked puzzled. Sir, these terms are lenient. After everything they did to us, Chun interrupted. We're going to show them what actual civilization looks like. The Council ruled through fear and force because they couldn't imagine any other way. We're going to demonstrate a better approach. It was a radical concept in galactic politics. Throughout recorded history, conquest had meant subjugation, exploitation, and often genocide. The idea of victorious forces offering protection and stability to defeated populations was so foreign that many Council worlds initially assumed it was a trap. But over the following weeks, as human administrative teams arrived on Council worlds, the truth became apparent. The humans weren't interested in ruling the galaxy. They were interested in rebuilding it. Chin walked through the corridors of what had once been the Council's primary governmental complex on Luxuria Prime, now converted into the headquarters for what humans were calling the Galactic Restoration Authority. The building buzzed with activity as human specialists worked alongside former Council personnel to establish new systems of governance, trade, and law. Status report. He requested from Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the former xenobiologist who now served as Director of Interspecies Relations. Remarkable progress, she replied, consulting a tablet filled with data. We've established functional governments on 83 worlds in the past month. The local populations are adapting to democratic systems faster than we projected. Apparently, most species prefer having a voice in their governance to being told what to do by distant bureaucrats. Chin smiled. Democracy. It was a concept the Council had dismissed as primitive and inefficient, suitable only for small populations that couldn't manage proper central authority. The humans were proving that it scaled quite well when implemented properly. Economic reconstruction? Also ahead of schedule. The free trade protocols we've established are generating more wealth in 6 weeks than the Council's controlled economy produced in 6 months. Turns out that when you let people trade freely instead of requiring everything to go through governmental intermediaries, commerce flourishes. Who would have thought? The sarcasm was justified. Human economists had spent years analyzing council economic data and reaching conclusions that would have been obvious to any first-year student of market systems. The council had maintained power partly by deliberately keeping their member species economically dependent on central authority. Remove that artificial constraint, and natural prosperity followed. Resistance movements? Surprisingly few. We've identified 7 groups attempting to restore council authority, but they're having trouble finding support among the populations they claim to represent. Most beings seem to prefer not being threatened with imprisonment or execution for questioning governmental policy. That was the element that had surprised even human planners. They had expected significant resistance to their occupation, had prepared for years of guerrilla warfare and terrorism from council loyalists. Instead, they found populations that embraced freedom with enthusiasm that bordered on relief. The council ruled through fear, Morrison continued, but they never built any genuine loyalty. When their ability to enforce obedience was removed, there was nothing left to hold their system together. Most beings are genuinely grateful for the change. Chun moved to the Central Command Center, where a massive holographic display showed the current state of galactic civilization. Green indicators marked worlds where democratic governments were functioning smoothly. Blue showed areas where economic reconstruction was proceeding ahead of schedule. Yellow indicated regions where transition was ongoing, but stable. There were remarkably few red indicators showing problems. Admiral Chun called out Commander Patricia Wells, his intelligence coordinator. Priority message from the Terran colonial region. The population referendum results are in. Chun turned his attention to the data stream she provided. The Terran colonial region, the scattered worlds where humanity's population had been relocated after the war, had been given the opportunity to vote on their future relationship with the new galactic government. The results were overwhelming. 96% had voted to join the Galactic Restoration Authority as full member worlds with equal representation. The remaining 4% wanted complete independence, which the humans had guaranteed they could have. Any requests for military protection? Chun asked. 17 worlds have requested human fleet protection while they establish their own defense forces. 3 others want to join the human military directly, and 6 have asked if they can contribute ships to our fleet construction programs. Chun studied the data with satisfaction. This was what they had really been fighting for, not conquest, but the right of every species to determine its own fate without fear of domination by stronger neighbors. The Galactic Council had maintained order through overwhelming force, and the threat of extinction for any who resisted. The Restoration Authority was proving that voluntary cooperation was not only possible, but more effective. Message from Captain Rodriguez, the communications officer announced. The diplomatic mission to the non-aligned worlds has been successful. 14 species have requested membership in the new government. 6 others want defense treaties. Only 3 have declared continued neutrality. The non-aligned worlds. Chun remembered when they had been humanity's only hope for survival, the species that had remained neutral during the war and might have offered refuge if humanity had been completely defeated. Now they were eagerly joining a galactic government that offered them genuine representation instead of dominated by a single power block. What about the former council species? Chun asked. The ones who actually governed before? Morrison consulted her data again. Mixed results, but trending positive. The Carillions have adapted to democratic governance remarkably well. Apparently their species' psychology is naturally cooperative, and they were never comfortable with the authoritarian aspects of council rule. The Valdris are struggling more, but their younger generations are embracing the changes. The Thraxians. She paused, and Chun knew there was a complication. The Thraxians are requesting a meeting with you personally. They want to discuss what they're calling species integration protocols. Chun understood immediately. The Thraxians had been the most militaristic of the council species, the ones who had pushed hardest for aggressive expansion and authoritarian control. They were also the ones most likely to cause problems in a democratic system. Schedule the meeting. But make sure they understand it's a discussion, not a negotiation. We're not the council, We don't give orders to species about how to govern themselves. But we also don't tolerate threats to other species' freedom. That was the fundamental principle that guided everything the Restoration Authority did. Every species had the right to govern itself however it chose, as long as those choices didn't threaten other species' similar rights. It was a simple concept that the Council had never grasped, and that the humans were determined to protect. Admiral, another aide approached with data tablets. The infrastructure reconstruction reports are ready for your review. Planet-side facilities, communication networks, transportation systems, everything we dismantled during the war. Chen took the tablets, but didn't immediately review them. Reconstruction is ahead of schedule. Significantly, having detailed intelligence on every system we destroyed made rebuilding much more efficient than we projected. Plus, we're getting volunteer assistance from local populations who want their infrastructure restored. Some worlds are contributing labor and materials beyond what we requested. It was gratifying but not entirely surprising. The humans had been careful to target only military and governmental infrastructure during their campaign, leaving civilian facilities intact. Now they were helping rebuild what they had destroyed, demonstrating that their victory was intended to be constructive rather than punitive. Chen walked to the central display and activated a wider view that showed the entire galaxy. Green indicators now covered roughly 60% of known civilized space, representing species that had joined the Restoration Authority or established friendly relations with it. Blue showed areas where reconstruction was proceeding smoothly. Yellow marked regions where transition was still in progress. The red indicators, representing potential threats or unresolved problems, covered less than 5% of the galaxy. 2 years, Chen said to Morrison, who had joined him at the display. We said it would take 2 years to establish functional democratic governance across the galaxy. Think we'll make it? At the current rate? We'll finish 6 months early, she replied. Chen, I have to ask, did you really plan for this level of success? Because if you did, you're the greatest strategic mind in galactic history. Chen smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Elizabeth, I planned for survival. Everything else is just a bonus we're determined to make the most of. 50,000 humans against an entire galaxy. We couldn't afford to think small. That was the truth of it. Faced with the prospect of species extinction, humanity had been forced to think in terms of absolute victory or absolute defeat. There had been no middle ground, no possibility of compromise. Either they would win completely, or they would cease to exist. The scale of their planning had reflected that reality. They had built weapons capable of destroying stars, developed strategies for conquering entire civilizations, and prepared for a war that would reshape galactic society. When victory came, it had come so completely that they found themselves responsible for governing 1,000 species across 10 million worlds. The remarkable thing was how well they were handling that responsibility. Admiral, the communications officer called out, "Priority transmission from Earth. President Martinez wants to speak with you." Chen moved to the secure communication station and activated the link. The holographic image of Earth's president appeared, her expression carrying the mix of pride and concern that had characterized their relationship throughout the war. Admiral Chen, President Martinez began. Congratulations on completing the transition ahead of schedule. The reports we're receiving suggest that galactic civilization is more stable now than it has been in centuries. Thank you, Madam President. The credit belongs to everyone who spent 6 years building this capability. We're just implementing the plan. About that plan, the Security Council has been reviewing the final phase protocols. Are you certain you want to proceed with full demilitarization? Chen understood her concern. The final phase of protocol restoration called for the systematic reduction of human military forces to levels appropriate for defense rather than galactic domination. It was a risk that many human leaders questioned, but Chen believed it was essential. Madam President, we didn't fight this war to become the new galactic empire. We fought it to ensure that no species would ever again face the threat of extinction for political purposes. If we maintain the military force necessary to dominate the galaxy, we become the very thing we fought against. And if another threat emerges? If some new enemy decides to challenge the Restoration Authority? Chen smiled, gesturing toward the display that showed green indicators across most of known space. Then, They'll face the combined forces of 1,000 species that have chosen to work together for mutual defense. That's a much more powerful deterrent than one species trying to police the galaxy through superior firepower. The conversation continued for several more minutes, covering technical details of the transition process and timeline for final military reductions. When it ended, Chun found himself alone with his thoughts and the holographic galaxy that represented humanity's greatest achievement. 6 years ago, 50,000 humans had been imprisoned on Hell worlds, facing the prospect of species extinction. Today, those same humans had created a galactic government based on cooperation rather than domination, freedom rather than fear, and voluntary association rather than imposed authority. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems to solve, conflicts to mediate, and the constant challenge of helping different species learn to work together. But it was working, and it was getting better every day. Chun activated the communication array one more time, sending a message that would reach every human ship in the galaxy. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Chun. Phase 4 is authorized. Begin implementation of final demilitarization protocols. Effective immediately, human military forces will be reduced to defensive levels appropriate for a member species of the Galactic Restoration Authority, not the dominant military power in the galaxy. It was the end of human military supremacy and the beginning of something that had never existed before, a galactic civilization based on principles rather than power. Looking at the peaceful green indicators that covered most of the galaxy, Chun knew they had made the right choice. The war was over. Humanity had won, and they had used that victory to build something better than anyone had dared imagine. The Deathworlders had returned home.